Good afternoon, everybody. The main issue at this European Council has been the crisis in Greece. Now, this matters to Britain because we are not immune to the risks from the Eurozone. A disorderly Greek exit from the Euro remains a major threat to Europe's economic stability, and it could be very damaging to the British economy. That's why I've urged my Eurozone colleagues to resolve this crisis, and I insisted we had a report back about the situation in the Council this morning. Now, the uncertainty in the Eurozone is in stark contrast to how we are turning the UK economy around. 5 years ago, when I came to my first European Council, Britain's economy was close to the edge. A 10% budget deficit, low growth, high unemployment. 5 years on, I can report 1.89 million more people in work, the fastest growth of any major Western economy, the deficit cut in half, and our national debt falling as a share of our GDP. We've created more jobs in the UK than the rest of Europe put together. Indeed, Yorkshire has created more jobs than the whole of France. None of this happened by accident. It is because we've taken the tough, long-term decisions that we are now starting to see the results. We need to stay on this path, not abandon it, just as it is leading our country from austerity to prosperity. Now, the other big issue for this summit was the situation in eastern Ukraine. I was determined to secure a clear signal that the EU's full package of sanctions will not be eased until the Minsk agreement is fully implemented. And that is what we have achieved. The Council conclusions state, and I quote, "The duration of the restrictive measures should be clearly linked to the complete implementation of the Minsk agreements, and it underlines our readiness to take further measures if required." Now, this shows that by working together, we do get things done. Sanctions on Iran to stop it acquiring a nuclear weapon. Practical assistance to help countries in North Africa fight terrorism. Trade deals with Canada and South Korea, together worth £1.8 billion a year to UK businesses. Our trade with Korea has gone up by 1/3 since we signed that deal. International action to help those in desperate need around the world, from Syria to West Africa, where we are helping to stop the spread of Ebola. Throughout, the United Kingdom has been and is a strong player at the table. And we've shown that when you come here ready to engage, to confront the difficult issues, and to stand up firmly for our position, then we advanced Britain's national interests. We've cut the EU budget for the first time in history. We've cut the red tape for businesses, exempting SMEs and micro businesses from new EU rules, and scrapping over 70 unnecessary EU proposals. We put power back in the hands of our fishermen so they can sell what they catch. We've negotiated a new single European patent that will reduce the cost for entrepreneurs by up to 80%, and part of that patent court will be in London. We've ensured new safeguards in financial services to protect the city. We've returned over 100 powers from Brussels to Britain, giving us more control over our borders, policing, and security. We've clamped down on benefit tourism at home, and we've kicked off a debate across Europe about what more must be done to ensure that freedom of movement is not an unqualified right, and that when new countries join the EU, this does not trigger mass migration across our continent. I vetoed a treaty that would have harmed Britain's interests. I've stopped Britain contributing to the Eurozone bailouts, and we've stopped attempts to discriminate against those countries outside the Eurozone, not least with our successful legal challenge last month. That is my record in Europe. It's a record of standing up for Britain's national interests, for fighting Britain's corner every step of the way in Brussels and elsewhere. But what matters most is that we change Britain's relationship with the EU once and for all. So the moment of truth is fast approaching. One of two people will represent Britain in Europe after the election. It's either me or Ed Miliband. On the 7th of May, there will be a very clear choice before the British people on Europe. If you send me back here as Prime Minister on the 8th of May, I have a very clear plan. I want to sit at that negotiating table with a mandate from the British people to reform the EU and fundamentally change Britain's relationship with it. For too long, this issue has been swept under the carpet, and I believe it is time to deal with it. If I'm returned as Prime Minister, that is what I will do. And then I will put the decision on Britain's future in Europe directly to the British people, in an in-out referendum before the end of 2017. It will be for the British people and the British people alone to decide whether we remain in the European Union on this new basis or leave altogether. If Ed Miliband comes here in June, there will be no reform, no referendum. There might be many in the EU who will breathe a sigh of relief because the status quo would continue unchallenged and the British people's concerns would be ignored. But I believe that would be bad for Britain and bad for Europe. So it's a big choice on May the 7th and a big opportunity. The opportunity to make sure the problems that bedevil Britain's relationship with the EU are dealt with, as I set out in my Bloomberg speech 2 years ago. The opportunity to change Europe for the better. The opportunity for the British people to have their say for the first time in 40 years on Britain's place in Europe. That will be the choice on the ballot paper on the 7th of May. Only the British people can take that decision. But for anyone who wants a strong voice for Britain in Europe, for anyone who wants to deal with issues that frustrate the British people about the EU, and above all, for anyone who wants a say in an in-out referendum on whether Britain should remain in or out, there is only one way to get things done, and that is to back me and my team on the 7th of May. So I say to the British people, give me another term, and I will give you your say on Europe. Thank you very much. Happy to take some questions.